Hi, my name is Dylan Straffen. I'm a member of Team 5 and I'm going to be going over our IST 412 food mood project demo for today. Just before I get started real quick, I'm just going to quickly go through kind of what I'm going to be talking through. We're going to start with some of the development goals for our actual project, why, and what we were aiming for when designing food mood. Secondly, I'm going to be going into our use cases for both of our applications, so both the mobile app and then the analytic app. And then thirdly, the actual demonstration of those use cases and the application itself. Before I get into all that, I of course want to start with the development goals for our project. So just as a kind of general statement, our goal was to help users better understand how foods they consume affect their mood both in the time and in the future. So we wanted to help draw relationships between the different foods our different user base would be consuming, track that food, and then find a way to track their mood as well over time, and then correlate the two so that we could eventually, in a perfect world, offer the perfect solution for foods to guarantee that our users will keep feeling good and won't eat anything that maybe would disrupt their mood. Now, in doing this, we knew there were kind of a number of things we had to accomplish in that. We had to, for one, keep track of all of the users' foods and make sure that they're constantly inputting that data into the app. And then secondly, we also had to keep track of their mood and their mood throughout the day and ensure that they're always adding to the app. And then with those two things, we had to tie them together, of course, and create some sort of system or correlation system to help actually make recommendations for food choices. So that was kind of the goals we set out with, and there are of course a number of different steps we took to kind of narrow down more specifics of that. But basically we came to the idea that we wanted a simple app that helped keep track of both food and mood, and then helped correlate the two and eventually make help display information and make recommendations that would help our users feel better both about the food they eat and the resulting mood as a product of that. After the process of identifying our development goals for the project, we then had to, of course, define the use cases that would go on to fulfill those development goals and complete the necessary functions of the application. You'll see over on the right side of the screen, I've actually written out all of our use cases for both our mobile application and our analytics application. Although there is, of course, overlap between the two, the majority of cases are separate. I'm going to just quickly go through each of these use cases and talk a little bit about why it's important to the application and then what, of course, that use case actually is. So you see we both have CRUD food and CRUD mood. That's create, read, update, delete, food, and mood. Obviously, keeping track of the user's food and the user's mood is one of the biggest and most important use cases of the application. It's a pretty obvious one. In terms of what it serves to do, it's going to help generate all of our actual data, or help to pull in all of our actual data, which we can then use later on to generate helpful suggestions and correlations for the actual users. So creating and reading, updating, deleting both food and mood were some we attacked very early on in the development stage, as they're an essential use case to the actual functionality of the application. Now, along with create, read, update, and delete, we also wanted to be able to view food mood history both in our mobile application and in our analytics application. That can kind of be seen as a statistics use case, but we basically wanted to have an area of the application where users could look back and see where their mood has gone over time, how it's been entered, along with see what foods they've eaten in the past. Just a cool place to actually store that data and allow users to look back on it kind of in their own way outside of the actual correlations and charts that we'll be bringing up from their user data later on. Now, along with this food mood history and create, read, update, and delete, we also had one more use case for the mobile application, and that was a notification system. Now, obviously, we want users to input as many meals and as much as many meals and as much mood-related information as possible so that we can have as much data as possible. And part of a good way to do that is to actually provide notifications in the application when users seem to have forgotten to maybe forget a mood or forget a meal. Now, to do that, we simply have notifications on a timer that is set up to allow to give users notifications when they have taken too long since their last input to the application. We thought that would easily help users add more data to the application and thus hopefully lead to better correlations and better information for the user later on. Now, that's most of the mobile application use cases, or at least a decent description of them. Now, with the analytics app, we of course, as I mentioned earlier, had the view food/mood history, which is similar to that stats thing that I mentioned, basically giving users a way to look back in both applications. But along with that, in the analytics app, we've also added a correlation use case. Now, that's one of the major functionalities of the application, as it actually provides the recommendations and the actual information that the application is supposed to generate for the user. So this is where we'll keep important things that show exactly how a user's mood might be changed by the food they've eaten. And to do that, we help to design, an algorithm that ties the two together when they've been added to the application at around similar times. Now, lastly, in the analytics app, we had a chart use case. This is pretty simple, but basically a more refined and better way to view certain aspects of information within the application. By generating live charts for the application / user, we're able to give the user the best information possible in a very easy to understand format. It's also very aesthetically pleasing, and it helps to give the app a more modern feel. But in general, it's used to just help provide a certain layer or an extra layer of information to the user to make the application more useful. Altogether, these use cases help to achieve our development goals for the project and really help to service our users' needs and functionalities. Next, I'm going to be going off into the actual application and showing some of the demonstrations of these use cases in action. To do that, I'm of course going to launch the application up here. Now, a use case I didn't speak about earlier in the video was that of the login / account creation use case. This is more or less assumed to be in most modern applications, so I didn't mention it earlier, but of course is in our application. Just to show that off, I'm going to create an account real quick. We'll just call this demo123, password 123. If I hit register, it should give me a nice little confirmation message. So demo123, 123. Now, for the purposes of this class and this demonstration, our group has created kind of a launch menu here to choose between the mobile application and the actual analytic application. Now, obviously, in a real-world situation, the mobile application would likely be on a mobile device like a phone, and the analytic application would typically be on a personal computer. But just for the purposes of this demo and for the class, we've created this launcher to allow the user to select between which of the two applications they'd like to view. So I'm going to start, of course, by launching the mobile application here. Now, you'll notice I'm receiving a reminder right on login that I haven't entered a food, and similarly I haven't entered a mood. This is something that will happen with every new account as they have no data yet, and we'd like to remind them, of course, to immediately enter in that kind of information as soon as possible. But similarly, for those who have not added food or mood for more than 4 hours, they'll receive a notification just to remind them, hey, how are you feeling? Have you eaten anything? Just to try and get as much data for the user as possible. Now, for the menu itself, we ended up choosing a very simple and minimalistic UI design. Of course, there's only 4 buttons here for the user to choose from. This makes it very easy to follow, and they're all very simply labeled for the user. We could have added extra fluff and more complexity to the design, but ultimately at this stage, the mobile application especially doesn't have too much complexity to its use cases or its functionality, so we decided to keep the actual user interface very simple. Now, just to show this off real quick, I'm going to go through the process of adding a food by simply hitting this button up here, typing in the food I've eaten. So in this case, let's say I've eaten a turkey sandwich. I'll hit add real quick and the food will be successfully added. If I go to food history, it'll be showing up here. This is, of course, the food history use case, and you'll see it shows both the food we've eaten and when we've eaten it. Similarly, the mood, I can go through the process of quickly adding in a mood here. Let's say the mood made me feel pretty good, so I'll add in it as a 4. It'll give me a confirmation that the mood's successfully been added. And then if I go to the mood history, you'll see the mood is shown right there. Now, keeping that actual time specifics is very important to our group, as it's the foundation for our algorithm for our correlations later. But it's also something we thought would be useful to display to the users. Now, that's more or less it for our actual mobile application and showing off kind of those use cases. So I'm going to quickly hop over to the actual analytics application. Just to show off some of the functionality a little better of the analytics application, I'm actually going to sign into a test account that we've added in the previous uses of the application, actual information regarding food and mood of a potential user, just to show off what the correlation's actually doing, and as along with our actual chart system. So I'm going to quickly launch into the actual analytic application. You'll notice also a very simple UI with simple options for our user. We included that same mood history and food history use case. You'll notice there's a bunch more foods that have been entered to this account, as I mentioned earlier, and similarly a bunch more mood, that have been entered to the account. But we did want to keep it simple and give users the option to view history in both applications. Now quickly I'm going to jump into the correlation button here, the one of our other main use cases. This is calculated based off of the time that food was entered and the time when moods were entered, and it kind of creates an average value for how particularly good a food might make you feel or make your mood feel at that particular time, and it then makes recommendations based off that. So previously I've eaten turkey and told the application that I've eaten turkey and green beans, and I've added information at some point, mood information at some point, that is the application is choosing to use these as recommendations for foods that'll make my mood feel good. And then similarly, it's giving me recommendations for foods that I should avoid for my mood. So it's clearly at some point I added that I've eaten bacon, and then maybe later that day I started feeling kind of down on myself, or my mood kind of took a turn for the worse, and the application is aware of that, so it's making recommendations based off of that information. Now, I'm going to quickly jump over to the actual chart use case. You'll notice this is pretty simple but very useful information for the users. Gives a nice little chart slash distribution of both the foods they've eaten and their moods. So you'll see about 30% of the time I'm feeling fantastic, but also 10% of the time I'm feeling just about as bad as it gets in terms of our rating scale. And similarly, it's got information regarding percentages of foods eaten and which I've eaten the most. And this is all based off of data that's been entered through the mobile application in previous uses of our actual app. So that's pretty much does it for a very high-level view of what the application does and the specific use cases in action. Now, of course, there's more detail and more specifics about how they're functioning and the services they provide, and there's always, of course, room for improvement too. But for the purposes of demo, I think that does a good job of demonstrating exactly what our use cases are and the functionalities that they are set to serve. So that just about does it for that demo itself. Thank you for watching. We've been Team 5, and this has been our food mood application.